Okay. How was everybody else's Monday? It's about 8 p.m. West Coast time on Monday, July 7th. And apparently Diddy and Epstein have both been exonerated for sex trafficking. DOJ announced last night. It's really amazing. They announced this on a Sunday night thinking they were going to get away with it, that nobody would notice, that they're not releasing any more documents from the Epstein files, that there is no client list. After Kash Patel, FBI director, Dan Bonino, the number 2 at the FBI, had talked for years that there is a client list. The MAGA base, again, in just their cognitive dissonance world, when confronted with all of the evidence that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were best friends for 15 years, and you get the QAnon people that were like, well, Trump was working from the inside. He was getting the evidence so that when he got elected a second time, he was going to bring down the cabal, which he failed to do during his first term. But the MAGA base has been clamoring for the Jeffrey Epstein evidence for years. And Donald Trump, during the 2024 campaign, said on multiple occasions he was going to release all of it again, which he failed to do during his first term. Anyway, it's brought back into awareness some past interviews that now Attorney General Pam Bondi had given in the past. In February, she was interviewed on Fox News by Fox News anchor John Roberts. He asked her, the DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? Bondi replied, it is sitting on my desk right now to review. In March, she gave an interview to Sean Hannity, claiming that she had received a truckload of evidence on Jeffrey Epstein. That interview took place on March 3rd. And he said this was a Trump's base expects this information to be public. This was a Trump campaign promise. When is this going to, and she's like, we all expect this to happen. And the FBI handed over a couple of 100 pages of documents, but I gave them a deadline to get us everything, She started to blame Kash Patel during that period of time because he was FBI director. And then she said, we received a truckload of documents or of evidence, thousands and thousands of pages of evidence. They said they have all the videos. They've watched all the videos. But she was blaming the FBI and Kash Patel, and he was blaming her before they issued this memo last night saying this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions. We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties. Remember that in December 2021, Epstein's, I don't even know what you would call her, partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, was convicted by a jury on 5 sex trafficking related counts, sex trafficking of minors, transporting minors, 3 counts of conspiracy to do these things, but there was no client list. So who was she trafficking these people to? Anyway, let me see here. Laura Loomer has demanded that Pam Bondi be fired or removed or resign. She calls her Pam Blondie. How come Blondie didn't sign her name to her own memo about the Epstein files? She needs to resign. This is going to suppress the vote in 2026. Okay. The American people in MAGA base will not tolerate being lied to. I hope that President Trump fires Pam Bondi if she lacks the shame to resign. I called for her resignation the day of Bindergate. You remember in February when they called a bunch of right-wing influencers to the White House and gave them each a big fat binder of part 1 of the Epstein files, and it was all stuff that was heavily redacted and had already been previously released. 5 months later, and Blondie is still an abomination. Epstein R-worded kids on her watch when she was Florida AG. Is that what this is about, her horrendous record? And that's a good point. Pam Bondi had served 2 terms as Attorney General for the state of Florida. During that period of time, Jeffrey Epstein was in West Palm Beach, Florida, and was operating freely doing these things. She never investigated him. It was common knowledge by that point what he was doing. She never investigated him, never indicted him, never brought him up on charges, never did anything during 2 full terms as Attorney General, and then she became Donald Trump's Attorney General, and now she's saying that there is no client list. After saying 4 months ago that that client list was sitting on her desk. MAGA is losing their shit over this. MAGA influencers are calling for her head. They're calling for Kash Patel's head. They think that Kash Patel and Dan Bonino have been fully indoctrinated into the deep state. Alex Jones thinks that they're being tortured. And again, the scope of denial on this thing, because MAGA influencers and the MAGA base are in an absolute rage at this memo and at this apparent conclusion to this case. They're all asking, why is Ghislaine Maxwell in prison? She was convicted on 6 counts of sex trafficking minors, and now Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, and Dan Bonino, number 2 at the FBI, are telling all of them there's no client list. There were no clients. There was no blackmail. There were no clients. After saying for years that there was a client list. Donald Trump was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend for 15 years, and these MAGA people, it simply eludes them. It simply eludes them. And Elon Musk, after having access to all of the data and information inside the federal government the first 3 or 4 months of this year, when he and Trump had their falling out a month ago, 5 weeks ago, whenever it was, Elon Musk tweeted, the reason they're not releasing the Epstein files is because Donald Trump is all over them. They were best friends for 15 years. I think there's only so much redacting you can do. It's Occam's razor, man. It's Occam's razor. The most obvious explanation is usually the one that's correct. I mean, they can't release these things because Donald Trump's on every page. He had his own entire page in Jeffrey Epstein's little black phone book. Something like 20 different phone numbers for Donald Trump were in Jeffrey Epstein's little phone book. I'm going to have to do a couple more videos on this to get through all the stuff that I organized here, but the most obvious answer is the answer. Trump and Epstein were best friends for 15 years. They lived a very short distance apart from one another in Manhattan and in West Palm Beach, where Jeffrey Epstein had 2 huge residences that were completely wired with video and audio that recorded everything that happened, and Donald Trump was at both of those residences repeatedly. He's all over that file.